Welcome, everybody. We're starting the webinar in about 1 minute's time. I'm going to bring on the first speaker, and actually, we're chatting before the event. We're going to be talking about two things here: connected devices and edge AI. Now, edge AI it requires some explanation because I think some people have different ideas, or they're a bit confused. What is edge AI? And so to kind of set the table for us, and before we get to the use cases, we're gonna get to the use cases in about 10 minutes. We're gonna have an opening talk that's gonna last for about 10 minutes. And I'm very pleased to announce I've got Bart De Witte here. Let's see if I can find you. And I'm so glad to have you on. I was speaking to Rachel Dunscombe, whose opinion I value very, very highly. And she said to me last summer, you got to get Bart on one of your webinars. So here you are, and you're doing some really interesting work in Edge AI, and you kind of alluded to it at the end in the after party of the event we had last month. And I'm going to give you the floor. I wonder if you could set the table for us and set the stage. Why are we doing this event? And what is Edge AI? What does it mean, and where is it going? And I'll depart.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Bart. I'm based in Berlin, in Germany. I've been in the health IT field for 3 decades. And during these decades, we've constructed digital scaffolding. Louis, just a minute. I'm now being hunted by my 6-year-old son who is joining. Louis, sorry for this. So for decades, we have constructed a digital sphere where we try to centralize everything what we have called our global civilization, our intelligence. And we have built, similar to ancient monuments, massive centralized cathedrals of computation. I come from IBM, my background. Everybody know that IBM became big with mainframe computers. I think there was even a quote that we said, like, the world has place for 6 supercomputers or mainframe computers. We all know the story. We went from mainframe to personal computing to mobile computing. So why are we thinking that when we use AI and intelligence and building AI systems, we will stick in that same centralized mainframe ID model where everything is centralized, where our thoughts, our actions, our experiences, our health data, all the data is being processed, and we're becoming dependent from some sort of singleton that is steering our lives with the interest of anybody who has, or the few people who have access to that. So I think what we are witnessing here currently is the same in a very rapid way what happened in the last 3 decades. First we had mainframe, then we had personal computer, we went to mobile. Now we are in the era of mainframe AI, like centralized AI, huge data centers, but there is a silent revolution happening because I can run large language models of 8 billion parameter models just on my iPhone. I have a new MacBook M5 Pro. I can run 70 billion parameter models on my MacBook. I can orchestrate 50 agents totally locally without anybody surveilling me, with being in full control, with not sharing any data, and with, just as we saw with mobile phones, with being completely independent. I don't pay a token price. I don't need a credit card to use it. I can start building on top of it whatever I want. And with whatever I want, we can discuss later about governance, but it gives you a sense of freedom if you can run these things directly on your phone. I've been in healthcare for 3 decades. We in Germany spent 8 billion euros for trying to centralize an electronic health record. The reason why we still don't have one is probably because a lot of the stakeholders in the game don't trust centralized systems. Physicians want to stay free and independent and try to lobby against these systems. So what if we can have both? What if we can have central access perhaps to information, but not processing everything centralized, and where users, physicians or patients on the same side, are still in control? I'm building on this future. I'm betting full size on this. We are building currently an operating system that is akin to what Android was for apps, where we have a Play Store, but we have a marketplace or a hub for agents, and where we give every clinician the power with tools to build their own world that they can run completely in privacy, completely compliant with HIPAA compliance and GDPR directly on your phone. And I'm going to share a bit of a personal experience that we talked before about. I was in Spain during the blackout, where electricity went out, like there was no electricity. 2 hours later, there was no mobile phone reception, there was no internet, there was no phone calls, and I had an emergency, a health emergency in my family, and I needed to go to a hospital. And going to a hospital in a foreign country where you don't have access to Google Maps, or you don't have Apple CarPlay, or all these things that you're normally used to, feels a bit weird when everything is gone. But I had a prototype of our operating system on my mobile phone. I was able to ask questions like, where are the closest hospitals? I was able to let it describe a written text on how to drive there. And I was also, and that was the weirdest thing, my car was locked behind an electric carport, and I couldn't leave the carport because it was electric. So I asked the AI system on my phone, do you know how to unlock that carport? And I gave him the brand, and I gave him the the problem, and it gave me exactly the manual on how to solve this. I felt like the one-eyed king in the land of the blind, a bit like having the Orwellian galaxy from Men in Black. That was the galaxy hanging around Orion Belt from that cat. And I felt empowered. I felt free. I felt empowered, having all that knowledge directly stored on my device. And that's why I sometimes say that AI for me is a compression algorithm for actionable knowledge. And if you think in that way and you see what happened in the last 20 years, I remember myself renting Blu-ray discs. Now I can store 300 hours of HD videos on my phone. These are compression algorithms. I can listen now to probably all the seasons from this video cast or this webinar, and I store this on my phone. I can watch it. I can listen for hours completely offline. The same will happen with AI. There is no reason to think why it's not happening. It is happening. And that means that we can build up different business models. We can allow local communities to build on top of that, and we can start sharing. I think that future is extremely bright. But if we let someone or a few others build us in the opposite direction, and trying to forbid these decentralized models through policies or anything else, we are moving back what I call sometimes the dark ages, where one central or few central systems will then process all our intelligence, centralized and controlled and surveilled in one single entity. And that is, for me, the most scariest and darkest development there is. So for me, there is only one option: decentralize, AI on edge, meaning you run it on your device. The models can be open sourced, and we can start sharing them just like we did initially through the internet. So think about it next time when you start building AI or start using. There are alternatives. We are shifting the game 180 degrees, where you will have the freedom to use AI in a way you want, without being surveilled, without sharing your data, without creating new asymmetries of power that will be used probably against you, and where everybody can get access to intelligence. So we finally get that abundance where everybody's talking about, but that abundance that is in control by you, by the owner, by the user. So I wanted to make that strong statement as an opener. We already had in the preparation of this call a very good debate, so I'm very looking forward to the conversations, because there are different opinions, of course, out there. But I think the shift that we are seeing is absolutely profound and underreported by media.
Thank you, Bart. And we're going to bring you back, but you got to start it off nicely. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And I'm going to now just a bit of to set the table on. We've got some people here on Zoom, and we have people on LinkedIn Live. Everyone's welcome. Just letting you know, there's some people on LinkedIn Live that may want to speak and present a use case. I'm going to bring you on. Ruban, you're next. But I just want to say, if you're on LinkedIn Live and you want to speak and share a use case, you've got to join us on Zoom webinars so I can put you on the stage. If you're on LinkedIn Live, you're in the audience and I can't bring you on camera. So we're going to be sharing the Zoom webinar link in the LinkedIn Live chat. So people on LinkedIn Live, you're welcome to stay there. But if you want to actually put your hand up and speak on camera, and we're going to be bringing on members of the audience to speak in the after party, you got to join us on Zoom webinars. Ruban, welcome.
Thank you, Jose. So I think for the people who are on LinkedIn or other places, some of our participants today, they were you before, and we got them to come and talk to us. And then we invited them as a guest in our future webinars because you have a valid point to make and you want to make, because we want this discussion to be very constructive, sometimes confrontational, some different opinions and all that. So I think that's an important part of it. So I represent SenzMate as who sponsors this event, and I run their global business development side of it. But I think today's discussion is so important. There are two aspects of it. I think earlier, we were having that discussion. Do people understand what is this edge AI means for healthcare? How does it work? And from my point of view is, healthcare is the most important area where these technologies, all the AI, all the different technology can be utilized to improve the healthcare. And as you know, in US, the cost is going through the roof, like $1 trillion or $3 trillion of healthcare. And how do you take that one down? But on the other hand, the healthcare has always been, in my model of thing is, so there are doctors, there are nurses, and those healthcare professionals who are presenting this information to the patients. They make their personal connections and all that. How do you use this AI and technology to enhance? So that is where, in my opinion, the edge AI come into play significantly. What that means is, just like these people who are interacting with the patients, interacting with at the healthcare organization side of it, you need to make sure you had to enable them with tools, with the knowledge and all that. So if you go and compare the medical school where these doctors go and learn and all that, what this new technology provides is the similar model. Still, the doctors are there to provide the technology and provide the healthcare and the medicine. But what you are getting with this AI is it's a continuous knowledge transfer, continuous information which is shared. And the second part of it, which we always talked about, was these doctors, they have their knowledge with their smaller group of, say, 100 patients and all that. What you have behind them is billions of people who are creating this information. And in there, like some of these rare diseases, like we were talking about one of them in Sri Lanka, there is a hospital, it is in the northern Sri Lanka. It doesn't have, they found one person having some kind of epilepsy issue. And, the doctor had the books and all that, where he was looking at it. And what they did was they started connecting doctors around the world, and they started having once a month webinar or seminar to those doctors. So they bring these cases. And when they brought it, then one guy said, "Oh, I seen this one in Africa somewhere in this village. Let's connect them together." So that was a human way of doing all this connection. So what AI at the edge and all this can do is take this centralized data, centralized information and analyze it there, but provide personally to the local area where they provide this information. So that is where the edge AI important. I think Bart also talked about the cost of these things. If you had to run everything on these billions of people and all that, and it takes a lot of cost. That's why those trillion-dollar companies are getting created. But I don't think, to support all of those people around the world, I don't think we can do that. That is where these edge devices, yes, like a phone, I don't know, you can see it now, your phone or your edge devices, or even whatever the patches you are adding, all of those can be a device where you optimize for your environment at the edge and you apply to that. As a use cases, what we were looking at it is one of the product we have developed for a company called Yogo Health in US. So they do this neuro elasticity. What that means is from the brain, there are areas get impacted by various aspects of it. Connection to your muscles, you can't move your hand after surgery, or you can't do, like for example, you have incontinent because the control is there. So the product they have developed is basically to able to reconnect that one using physical therapy. For that, they needed a solution which can applicable at the edge, where it will work together with the people and putting some devices and analyzing the information continuously and giving them feedback and do that. Think about if that has to be done in the centralized, in a cloud and various aspects of it, the latency will kill you. And the information will be so much expensive because we had to move the data, move the back. So where the edge AI is so important is, it is private. It can be targeted for you. It can be applicable with the lowest latency, and it can give you a lot of freedom for experimental part of it, because that way you get to do this one close to the patient. So that is where I think we have a lot of solutions we can develop as a community. So I'm hoping to hear a lot more about that, Jose.
Thank you so much, Ruben. And I'm going to bring on, also in California. We don't get too many people in California because of the time difference. But we've actually moved a little bit. We've moved 2 hours back. So now they're coming. We used to do this 2 hours earlier. Sam.
I'll be here bright and early if you need me, Jose. Appreciate you having me. Thanks everyone for joining. As Jose mentioned, my name is Sam Knapp. I'm Ferrum's AI Partnerships Manager, based in San Francisco, so morning for me. As we continue this discussion around edge AI, edge devices, one thing I want to touch on is monitoring the performance of these AI algorithms, specifically in healthcare. I think it's really important that we keep that front of mind as we're working to see clinical outcomes and patient outcomes. We need to keep this top of mind. So when I think about Ferrum Health and what we do, I kind of split it into 3 different segments, 3 different products. The first being our model hub. So this is where I come into play in my job. Again, I manage our partners. We have over 40 different partners that are developing AI that can be on edge devices, whether you're thinking MAMO and CAD. We have partners that do that, Neuro, Sure. We have all these different use cases. I'm vetting out the most high value use cases for health systems, ensuring that these algorithms are performant and are not adding anything to physician workflows, and we're bringing them into our model hub. Secondly, we have our deployment fabric, which I think is something that really differentiates us in the market, which turns these fragmented clinical AI, especially when we're talking about edge AI, into one single governable, observable backbone for health systems. We do this by integrating with your PACS EMR worklist just once, so I think of it as one plugin. And that way we have all of these different clinical AI applications, use cases specifically, again, referring to these edge AI use cases. The health system has access for real-time monitoring of this data. That brings me to our third point, or third product, which is our observability lens. And I think this is what's especially relevant for our conversation today. What we do is we provide real-time ongoing monitoring to the clinical AI's performance, so that when these health systems are deploying what feels like very fragmented AI, they're deploying a breast algorithm on their mammo devices, they're deploying neuro algorithms on their neuro devices, that they're still able to see performance. They're still able to see, is it working on this device? Is it because the device is set up differently? Is it working on different patient demographics differently? So we're measuring sensitivity, specificity, agreement rates, even ROIs. So as we continue this discussion around edge devices, I think that's one thing we should keep top of mind, is that, as Bart mentioned, I do think it's the future, but I think we should be careful and specific about how we roll this out, especially when we're talking about patient outcomes and a environment as crucial as health systems.
Can I ask you a question? You mentioned discussions. I did an interview recently with somebody who works for the NHS. I know it's probably different in California or in the United States. I know most of your work is the United States. And they're saying they're starting to look at procurement differently in terms of health AI. Because traditionally, they looked at a solution quite deterministically. They made a purchase decision, and then they go to an adoption period. And now so it's almost like one and done. We've purchased it, and the evaluation is complete. And there might be adoption challenges later on, but the procurement team is largely done with it. Now they're saying, no, the procurement team is staying with it for an extended period of time, even after. And they're saying the reason why we're doing that, is because the solution could be different a year from now. Are they, and I don't know if this is inside baseball, is procurement involved in terms of looking at your products and what they do for health AI?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct on the direction of travel here. I think one of the main hurdles health systems have been seeing is, okay, we've identified a use case that theoretically works, theoretically is adding value, but for them to actually adopt it, that's the key. So procurement is, I think correctly, now starting to look at not just the use case and the performance of the algorithm, does it fit in the workflow? Is it going to ultimately drive value? And to do that, it needs to be adopted.
I've heard something else, and I'm sorry if this sounds like a fishing expedition, but that they won't admit this publicly, but a lot of them they're kind of overburdened in procurement teams with the amount of work they have to do now. There's more work involved in vetting all these solutions, and it takes longer and has to be done for an extended period of time. And that creates bandwidth problems in healthcare. Are you seeing that? Is that something that people are turning to you for help with?
Yeah, I think that's exactly where our expertise comes in. We are A, vetting these algorithms before they join our model hub, but B, we're helping health systems develop their AI strategy with them, understanding what use cases, what specific applications work best for them. And then we have the observability piece, which I touched on. So as they're going to deploy these algorithms, they can actually see it is valuable on my data with my patient demographic, and be able to monitor that in real time, instead of it kind of being a black box where yep, this sounds great, this sounds like it fits, they deploy and hope it works. That's kind of the way of the past, I think, and the future is going to be, and is, continuous monitoring of these AIs.
I think, Sam, one of the things which I have seen also is the AI, everything was a lot of activities, but what you are talking about, the compliance and usability and efficacy, like are they really doing what they propose and all that? That is, business need to be there. So it looks like you guys are leading on that part of it, because it's very important for people to say, yeah, I'm spending like, $100 million, because all the CEOs are now coming and saying, oh, you need to use AI for something. And they don't know whether are they getting something out of it. Looks like you guys are in the right path to help these organizations, choose the right one, at least get that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We're seeing more and more health systems create specific AI governance committees because they know, just given their workload challenges, they need help, and AI is the answer. But it needs to be deployed thoughtfully and correctly, and it needs to be the right AI application for specific health systems. So we're seeing more and more health systems invest in making sure they do that correctly.
Okay, I think you want to ask him, Brian? Or you want to read it out?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Just in your third pillar there, you were talking about the observability lens, and I'm just curious about explainability, and if that's part of, if that's combined within that same product essentially, or if that's a different consideration.
Sorry, can you expand upon what exactly you mean by explainability?
Well, there's different frameworks. There's, typical a machine learning and LLM explainability, right? Lime, for instance, where the model weights are explained. When I talk about explainability, however, what I mean is for the end user. So if it's a physician, that's the end user. What do they understand about what data was involved in the AI model decision? Or if it's hopefully a patient, what explanation are they given about how AI has been part of that decision context? And observability allows you to see one layer of that, but it doesn't explain it. So that's what I'm asking about, essentially.
Yeah, good question. The observability lens, as I said, is an ongoing monitoring. Health systems have access to that themselves, but that's where we come in as a partner. The observability lens is great at identifying trends on how this algorithm's performing. So taking it more like 30,000 feet, long-term strategy, is this the right application for me? And then if you're getting into specifics around what you're speaking to here, that's where we as a partner come in. We want to be their strategic partner, helping them understand these trends and make decisions with these trends.
So essentially the enterprise user would like the explainability would fall on them from using your observability tool and the other pillars. That's then on them to kind of figure that part out, because you have the lens that you're giving them, but then they go the next step.
We want to provide them with the correct data, and it's ultimately up to them to make decisions. We help them the best we can, and if they have questions, that's where we want to be the partner we can be. But we want to arm and equip them with as much data as possible to make the best decision they can.
Yeah, I think, Brian, you asked an interesting question. I think this is a little bit different. I think in addition to what observability and all that. So I'm working with a team of people like around the world. Actually, this is one person from Australia, one person from Sri Lanka, one person from UK, and they came together. They are working on what you said about explainability of all these various things. They are working on actually not, it's a healthcare, but it in pharmaceutical settings. There are medications being, the protein folding and all those things. A lot of people are throwing, oh, it won't work or it will work. And they are getting into saying why it won't work. So they are building this another layer of explainability of the results. When they say this, what do they mean? And what are the things? And it is becoming another field of, explaining why this works or why doesn't it work. And that's going to be the future also. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to bring our next use case. Thank you so much, Sam.
Thanks, Jose.
And Mark, are you ready? Ready or not? And I think at the beginning of the webinar, Ruben said, oh, sometimes we hook up with people. He didn't say that. He didn't use that language in the after parties. We hooked up with Mark in the after party. And here he is on the main stage. So welcome.
Thank you.
And we've had a lot of conversations with you, Mark, privately and in other forums, and really inspired by your approach. I'm not going to paraphrase what you do. I'm clumsily introducing you to the audience. And Mark's a very powerful advocate for giving patients access and control of their data in a way that is meaningful, not just legally compliant. And I'm going to give you the floor, Mark. I hope I did a good job of introducing you.
No, quite well, Jose, and stuff like that. And I really don't think it was that clumsy. Hello, everybody. Mark Haddle. I have a company called Data Solids, and what we're working on is a different approach, a sea change, if you will, to how data within healthcare is stored and shared. And currently, right now, it's very fragmented and it's scattered across an average of 8 to 12 different platforms, databases, cloud environments. And we got this way through this asymmetric adoption of these different digital technologies over about the past 15 years. And, it has created this problem when it comes to the state of patient data, that it is so fragmented and scattered, and in varying non-interoperable proprietary formats, that the exchange of the data becomes very challenging. And this is especially notable for patients that have to navigate extended care journeys, which would be those that would be, grappling with cancer, rare disease, recovering from traumatic brain or spinal injury, to where they have to see multiple specialists, have multiple patient encounters as they get back on the road to recovery. And the data does not follow them as they navigate, through these successive different patient providers. And it's creating a real problem when it comes to patient satisfaction as well as, treatment plans. So we, realize that, a practical solution would be if you could have everything in a complete longitudinal record and have that in one place. And the question becomes, where is that one place? Because any of the incumbent data stewards, the marketplace dynamics would never allow them to become that one place, because that would give them an imperialistic monopoly over patient data, and that would never be allowed to happen. And so the practical solution we look at is, why not make the patient that one place for that complete record? Now, we've seen this approach before with different personal health record apps, personal health vaults. And there's a graveyard of previous attempts with some really big names like Apple and Google and Viva. And they really did not achieve the adoption that was anticipated, just by a structural problem there, where patients really are not fully comfortable uploading their complete health histories onto a third-party platform. But also, patients really don't have actionable data in their possession that they can upload should they want to. And that's really what we landed on, was having patients having control of their data is especially impactful, especially if they can be that single destination for that complete record. Currently, they don't have the technical ability to function as such. And that is what we're developing at Data Solids, is we want the patient to be able to have equal footing, but technical parity with the other stakeholders within the sharing ecosystem, so that they can traffic in the same types of data blobs and formats and schemas that are routinely exposed and exchanged millions of times a day between providers and payers, but never patients. And so we want to elevate them to equal status within that sharing environment. This has profound ripple effects, because it is now about control of data. And you will not have control of your data unless you have custody or possession of it. So long as your data is hosted or resides on someone else's infrastructure, they have control of it. You have ownership, absolutely. That has never changed, but they have control. And so by having the patient having that actual control, that custody, creates a much better environment when it comes to the data management. It creates the portability for these patients as they navigate these extended care journeys. And this is especially relevant in rural or tribal health, or people that have these extended care journeys, is that data portability, that the data does follow with them and they can selectively decide who they want to share it with. And the data that they would hold is also complete, comprehensive, and current. So it's better data than can be found anywhere else because of that unifying mechanism. And so when it comes to AI, when it comes to particularly edge applications within healthcare, AI depends singularly on training data. And so what we look at is the patient can now, because they have control of their data, they have possession of it, they can now use that as for prompts within the AI applications that they need. And so just for a practical real world illustration was, you go see your primary care physician. This actually happened to me. And they noticed a spot on your head and they said, you might want to see a dermatologist about that. And so I'm like, okay, anyone you can recommend? And they like, no, we really can't. You need to go find your own. And so now that I have control of all of my data, my clinical as well as my payer data, all my insurance plan data, I can then use a algorithm that can say, all right, find me dermatologists that are within 15 miles of my house, that are in my network, that are accepting new patients, and that have health grade scores of 4 stars or higher. And it can produce a return that helps me so much. And this is almost a special iteration of WebMD, to whereas I don't have to go and do all of this detective work myself. I can have an algorithm do it for me. And so that's when we want to have that local control of data, which is going to have much better capability when it comes to AI, particularly within the edge. And not only do I have all of my clinical data, I have my billing and payment data, but I also can have all of my trackers and wearables and all of the devices that I have myself, all in one place, all of which can be used to train an algorithm for, so that I can have a better patient experience, health equity, and even patient empowerment, because I have control of a resource. I have control of that complete record, and it's about control. Ownership is subordinate to it. We own this, but so long as my data resides on your servers, you have control of it. I can assert my ownership rights and direct you to do something with it, and I just hope that you do it. But I wouldn't know if you did or not. That's the difference. And this really, you deal with this every day. This isn't unlike your dry cleaner or your auto repair shop, to where you entrust your owned property to them for a specific purpose, to either be cleaned or fixed. And while they have it in their care, custody, and control, they can move it around. They can put it somewhere. You still own it, but you have entrusted it to them for a specific purpose. So they also have a responsibility that they have to protect it from theft or vandalism. But again, you have ceded control temporarily. And when you're dealing with something intangible like digital data, custody matters. And right now, patients or individual users even, do not have the technical means to be able to function in a store and share environment. And that is what we are solving for at Data Solids.
Thank you, Mark. Do you mind, are you okay to stay around for the after party?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I'm going to bring on our next speaker. And Brian, we've already heard from Brian. and I wonder if and actually, because a lot of people they've got questions about security and interoperability, and we're going to get to some of the questions in a moment.
Sure.
But just before the webinar, you were talking about the governance and security piece when we were discussing this privately. And I wonder if you could cover that.
Yeah. So this is a challenge. And let me start with a caveat. I am a big fan of edge AI devices in general. I think that this is one of the kind of last frontiers of medical and healthcare use cases to bring on board. It's important for us to figure this out and get it right, so that we can use AI responsibly for edge AI devices. That said, there are significant challenges in doing this, and this is why it's one of the last to happen. It is more challenging. Large healthcare systems and enterprise systems themselves use thousands of edge devices every single day. Now, what we're talking about is developers developing new devices and patients or users, whether those users are individual physicians or patients that want to use AI edge on the edge for their own use cases, right? And that's kind of a very different set of problems and issues. However, edge devices in general invert a lot of the governance assumptions that are built into AI healthcare currently, right? And so I'm going to talk about a few of those very specifically. And I'm going to have to differentiate slightly between US versus EU or other parts of the world, because the FDA in the US, the FDA regulates medical devices and AI within the medical device space differently, and that AI related regulation is developing. Like, it's not entirely clear. In early 2025, FDA clarified some of this, but there's still a lot of gray area. There's still a lot up in the air, and the guidance itself is not clear. If you ask attorneys, and I'm not a lawyer, but if you ask lawyers for their opinion on this, 10 attorneys will give you 10 different answers, right? So there's not a lot of clarity here, but there are some things that are clear. One is that with edge AI in general, you have what we would call a locked model, right? So the minute I download an app to my phone and it is actually an edge device, not connected to the cloud, there's hybrid models, but if it's clearly only an edge device, right? It is what's called a locked model, at least at that point in time, right? It can access the cloud later. We can, deal with that aspect from a hybrid perspective, but it is what's called a locked model. FDA treats these any medical device that's a locked model differently from one that evolves because of AI in the future. And FDA requires what's called a PCCP, a predetermined change control plan for edge devices, right? So a builder would say, oh, we'll just get around to updating the model when we improve it. FDA is saying, oh, hold on a second. You can only update the model using the exact validation methods that were pre-cleared within the FDA. The minute you change it, it's a different device, right? So if you build an on-device validation suite that runs before, weight updates, for instance, are committed, then it's the same device. But if you update the weights, that's potentially, from FDA's perspective, a new device. And unless you submitted this predetermined change control plan, you're out of compliance, right? In the EU, this is a little bit different. So in EU, Edge AI is always classified as high risk, right? Article 12 mandates both logging and traceability. The inversion of the governance perspective here with Edge AI is that in the cloud, logs are easy. The logging of an action, the logging of the data trail, whatever, for audit trail purposes. At the edge, immutable local logging becomes a product feature, right? It's no longer just a nice to have diagnostic tool for evaluation, right? It's going to protect a vendor, for going to the procurement question earlier, from liability if a physician, for instance, is using that device offline, right? But it produces inaccurate results, or they're using them improperly. Maybe they're using it out of the guide of how it's supposed to be used. If you've got that logging, you're protected. If you don't have the logging, you're going to be in trouble. Okay. So third issue is around knowledge in the models themselves, and what we would call in the medical or healthcare world, like clinical expiration, right? As a governance layer. So context is perishable, right? So again, the minute you've downloaded a model and it stays on your device and you're not connecting to the cloud, in that moment in time, the context and the knowledge is only as good as what you downloaded on your device. So say you have no internet connection for a month for some reason, and there's an update to the knowledge layer, something very significant, right? An adverse event associated with a very specific drug. That's not updated on your device. So the medical knowledge base that's not synchronized should trigger, and you could certainly create a guardrail on your device that triggers a degraded mode that would restrict its decision making for things that potentially degraded during that time period. But you've got to have built that guardrail in. It's not going to do it on its own, right? And so, again, you're going to have stale advice in a device potentially, and that's a liability issue there. I think some of the examples that Bart gave earlier about, being in an environment where you couldn't unlock, are very good kind of warning signs about some of the challenges here. That does not mean don't build, developers and builders should not build devices that are edge devices. That's still an important use case, and for most parts of the world, something that's needed right now, and that hospital systems or healthcare systems are already trying to integrate. But it means from a governance perspective, you have stability problems, potentially. You have validity problems, potentially, the clinical expiration thing I mentioned. You have traceability problems, right? If it's agentic and you have one agent that's overriding the other agent, because one has better connectivity or updated more recently than the other one, you've got an audit trail conflict, okay? Safety guardrail, same thing. Determinism, hard-coded safety valves that override AI logic may be needed on edge devices, but that's very different from what developers tend to do, which is focus on performance first, right? Which model is better? So audit trails, immutability is a challenge. And then finally, the human in the loop challenges are a little bit different too, and kind of inverted. Here, the clinical autonomy becomes a problem. So, again, referring specifically to the EU AI Act, there is what's a provision called the right to explanation, right? And requires a manual override that works 100% online, is part of how lawyers are currently interpreting that particular clinical autonomy aspect of the EU AI Act. So those are some of the challenges. I didn't mention model drift itself, and again, that's an inversion. So from a regulatory perspective, again, you've submitted a device, it's got approval for an intended use. What happens if after 6 months, the local data that you're using the device for has changed dramatically? And from an FDA perspective, you would have to submit again. For other jurisdictions, it's unclear. So model drift is a different consideration in the context of edge devices than it is for anything that has access to the cloud, where you can have clear tracking of F1 scores or other model drift, math involved. So those are just some of the challenges there. They're not insurmountable at all. So I don't mean to put a wet blanket over the developers or builders here, as I am one myself. I'm just outlining some of the regulatory here. Actually, no, the FDA regulatory stance on AI is not exactly clear. It is clear depending on who's running the FDA at any given point in time. But again, if you submit to FDA, it's clear at the minute you get a decision. But right now, that could change 3 months from now. Is the problem?
Thank you, Brian. And are you okay to stay for the after party?
Yes.
I'm going to bring on, let's see, Bart.
Yes, Jose, I'm going to bring in a very different angle here. We're trying to innovate in a space that needs innovation. And I think what a lot of people are missing here in the discussions on AI is that we still think in our frameworks, in our boxes, as we in the same frameworks as we have been developing software. Recently, somebody told me we used to have 25 million software engineers. Now we have 6 billion people that are able to create software. I think that is the reality today. You see the number of apps being published on an app store increasing. You see the number of repositories that are published on GitHub increasing in an exponential way. That is reality. So in that same reality, what we are doing with our Edge AI solution is we are hosting what we call an agent builder hub, where clinicians can build with very simple tools agents that they can construct together. They can download it as a containerized solution, and they can immediately use it on their mobile phone. Is there utility in that? Definitely. We have been witnessing cardiologists, and this is not about clinical AI, a cardiologist needing, simple example use case, needing to apply for a national registry with each heart valve transplantation he does. He needs to sit at least 1 to 2 hours to extract data out of different systems, to put it in a report sending to the government. Well, if you sit 2 hours to just extract data out of different systems and you have 1,200 cases a year, you spend 1.5 full-time employees just doing that. The CIO in that hospital didn't find it relevant to solve this because it's a single user with a single problem. But what we realized, if we give these people the ability to build an agent that actually extracts that data on device, he takes screenshots. We have an OCR agent on device. We give him all the tools he wants to process that completely locally, solve that problem by himself, and in full compliance with a governance framework that we are building. We empower that clinician to solve his own problems in a similar way to a lot of people who started coding software by just sending out some prompts. I'm building software for teaching my kids by just sending out prompts because I cannot find the right educational software for my kids. Are doing exactly that same way. So that world is changing rapidly. So if we think about using and utilizing AI in healthcare, we should not patronize these patients. We should not go in that, again, patriarchic mode by, here are the AI systems you can use. And then we end up with 71% of the NHS doctors illegally using ChatGPT on their private mobile phones, sending out data in a fully illegal, incompliant way. No, we should empower them to do that in a very compliant way, building these AI agents that they, and I agree with that part of ownership, they can own these agents, download it, and completely control that agent. I disagree with the statement that was made before by Brian that the AI Act, or according to the European Union, Edge AI is a high-risk AI. That would be completely new. Yes, there are requirements in terms of security and governance, but the AI Act doesn't define the deployment where that sits. Like there is no, in the AI Act, anything written about where you deploy these things. Next to the fact that when you deploy them locally and you compare the energy use, then as we use compressed or quantized models, we can do the same with 300 times less energy. So we are even more sustainable, to bring that factor in. So I think when we look at edge AI, we need to rethink things. We need to rethink how we build. We need to rethink how we empower. We need to rethink which business models we deploy, and we need to rethink on how far we allow clinicians to solve their own problems. Because believe me, they have a lot of problems that need to be solved in order to let them focus back on their patients. And to give one concrete example, we have a very simple tool where we are still in the closed, we haven't opened anything, what we're doing. We're testing, we don't want to move fast and break things, so we're testing with clinicians. And we allow them to record their own voice for 10 seconds, fine-tune an automatic speech recognition model. They can then create on a template a scribe agent that then even extracts then the clinical features for a soap or whatever kind of template. And then they can download their personalized scribe agent and they can run it without zero token cost, completely in full privacy. That is what I call innovation. Not using an API, building a wrapper out some API from a big AI system that sucks again all that data into a centralized model. So I think that's what I wanted to bring in, be inspired to just rethink with all these things that we have and don't start to think that we need to replicate on a phone that what we have seen in the cloud, because I think we can build in a very different way and empower these clinicians to do greater work, to feel them, to give them the feeling of empowerment and to let them solve their own problems. I think looking at the burnout rate of these clinicians, looking at the job satisfaction, we have a lot to do. So that was my part of use case that I wanted to share. Looking forward to the discussion.